All right, welcome to the WTF Divorce podcast. Today we are lucky to be joined by Nicole McNichols. Nicole is a human sexuality professor at the University of Washington. Good to see you today, Nicole.
Hello, Rob. Nice to see you too.
And we've got Christy here from WTF Divorce also, so we have a male and female opinion.
Hi, Christy.
Hi, Nicole, excited to talk.
Me too.
So let's jump right into it. Our Instagram, which I do admit is probably 80% women, but a topic that we everybody is interested in, but we don't really talk about that much is sex, dating, relationships, all of that after divorce.
hmm
So we put out to our Instagram, like, what are some things you're worried about? What are some experiences that you're struggling with? And we got quite a bit of responses. So let's throw them out to you, Nicole, and hear what you think.
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay, so big thing that was common that we heard from a lot of people is like getting comfortable having sex, meeting somebody new, hooking up after they've been married for 10, 20 years to the same person. Let's start there.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think it's really important to have a little self compassion and some patience with yourself, right? I mean, understand that it is scary coming out into the dating world when you've been in a 20-year marriage or however long your marriage was before. And chances are, if you are in the position where you're getting divorced, I'm going to guess that for the majority of you, your sex life was probably not fire. So this is a real chance for you to launch that part of your life and to really come into yourself. And so I think what's really important is, first of all, don't be afraid to have conversations with new partners that you meet, right? It's okay to acknowledge that you're a little bit nervous and that this is new for you, because chances are it's probably going to be new for the person that you're connecting with. And those are just going to be really common experiences. And I think if you can have conversations about it beforehand, it's going to make you a lot more comfortable and it's going to kind of take a lot of the pressure off. The second thing is that, I think that a lot of people who are, in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, who are in the stage are likely, we did not grow up during the sex positivity movement. And so chances are you're going to need to take a little bit of time in the beginning, getting reacquainted with your body, right? And so this might mean trying out some different types of sex toys, masturbating, understanding the exact types of touch and stimulation that feel good to you. There's a wonderful website. I have no connections to it, but I highly recommend it. It's called Oh My God, Yes. It's a company that it did a collaborative research project with thousands and thousands of women between all ages, and it did it in collaboration with the Kinsey Institute. And what they did is they went out and they interviewed thousands and thousands of women to understand what are the exact types of touch and the exact forms of stimulation and the techniques, everything from edging to orbiting to the drive-by. And I would say spend some time exploring a site like that and then trying it out, because the key to having amazing sex, especially when you're going to when you're starting to have sex with a new partner, is that you want to understand your body. And if you don't know what's going to feel amazing to your own body, it's going to be really hard to communicate that to a partner, right? And so the more you can get in touch with yourself, the better you can be. And then I think on top of that, the other layer here is, of course, the relational dynamic, right? It's makes sense to take a little bit of time to look inward and to try to figure out what are the exact types of sexual experiences that you're interested in having right now, right? Are you looking really to get back into a relationship? Maybe you are, right? Maybe you are not, the idea of having casual sex or sex when there's not really a huge chance of it developing into something doesn't really appeal to you. But I would really make sure that you appreciate that you're probably in a really vulnerable spot right now. And it makes sense to communicate upfront to sexual partners ways to understand that you're on the same page, right? At the same time, if you have been in a marriage where it was stale sex and you're not ready to jump into a long-term relationship, that is perfectly fine. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence, and I have a lot of female divorced friends that will absolutely testify to this, which is that for women in middle age to later age, it actually, there can be a lot of pleasure that comes from casual sex experiences. Women are often more confident that age. They understand their bodies. They are up for sexual adventure and exploration. And don't be afraid if those are the types of experiences right now that seem more appealing to you. There is no shame in that whatsoever.
That's fantastic. Christy, I know one of the things that you brought up was the shame and the discomfort and the difference between men and women. Any questions for Nicole about this?
I kind of want to spin off a little bit differently than that train of thought, but kind of piggyback on where you went. I feel like for the female perspective, coming off of a divorce, a lot of times the stale sex can even be coming from like the mother role, like getting lost in motherhood, kind of losing her identity to motherhood, losing her sexuality as she kind of, threw herself into raising her kids, focusing on others, and has lost how to kind of get in touch with her spicy side. And now you've come off
Mm-hmm.
a divorce and you're looking for that again, and you're kind of warring with yourself of, how do I maintain me as a mom, but also get to lean back
Mm-hmm.
into some of my own like feminine energy and, feel sexy again and put myself out there in that way too.
I think that's such a critical point because we have to understand that our sexuality and our sexual selves, we don't exist in just this silo that's totally separate from the rest of our lives. And to the extent that we can experience sexual confidence and identity in other realms of our lives, the more we're going to be able to then translate that into our sexual experiences. So yes, for a lot of us, our roles have been largely defined by motherhood. Really, a lot of us have spent the last decade or however long you were in that marriage, mostly in a role where you were caring for the needs of other people. And so, first of all, I think it requires taking a step back and understanding that focusing on your own needs, focusing on your own interests, developing an identity that is separate from that role, that's not something that's indulgent, right? We're as women, especially, I think we're frequently socialized to think that the needs of our family, our children, our partners need to come first. And this is really a time in your life where you get to reclaim your individuality. And so that might mean trying different things, branching out, right? New hobbies, new interests. This is your chance to maybe get back into that career that you put on hold. There can be so much confidence and so much joy and pleasure that can be derived from those experiences. And I think the better able the more you allow yourself to express a certain extent of like assertiveness, the more self-assertive you can be in those environments, the more self-assertive you're going to be in the bedroom. And that's just something that really is worth paying attention to.
That definitely kind of links me back to where Rob had taken the conversation too, is as far as like the men versus women and this idea for men to find it so easy to have casual sex and have multiple partners and kind of, explore their options sexually, where women like you said, have this stigma around it or feel like it is not for them or it's not their place or have a harder time like leaning into that side of themselves. And I would think, especially coming off a marriage, like you said, it's an opportunity to gain confidence. It's an opportunity to enjoy sex again. And how do you as a woman like work past that stigma or break down, like shatter that ceiling?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's some really interesting gender dynamics that certainly come into this. First of all, just to take a step back, if we look at a lot of the research, what we find with divorced individuals is that oftentimes for men, the hardest part is that they've kind of lost their social life, right? Because a lot of times in relationships, at least where there were, adherence to traditional gender roles, the man kind of supplied the finances and the woman kind of made friends and organized dinners out and the parties. And so they get divorced and suddenly the man feels like, oh my God, what happened to my social life that my wife used to manage? Whereas women, not surprisingly, are more often in those types of marriages to think, oh my God, where's my source of income going to come from now, right? It's more financial stress. So first of all, men through divorce are much more likely to experience a sense of loneliness, right? Whereas women are going to be more likely to be connected and supported by friends that they've connected with. So from that, the idea that men are going to be able to go out and have a bunch of sexual experiences, whereas women are going to struggle, that's a little bit of a stereotype, I think, because I think that sure, men may, we socialize men to, want casual sex and to, even if you look at male friendships, a lot of times, what are men really going out and doing together? They're, playing golf or they're, going out and doing some kind of activity together. Women are more likely to like go get coffee, go get lunch. With men, it's almost more similar to like the parallel play that we see with kids where, they're doing things together, but is there really that kind of intimate, connected, self-disclosure type of conversation that women are more likely to have? So a lot of times men may think, okay, I'm supposed to go out and have these sexual experiences because that's what society expects of me. And then they find those to be rather empty, right? They think, well, gosh, maybe that was pleasurable, but was it really that emotionally connected? And was it really that satisfying? And again, what the data show is that for women, it's a little bit different. Women, excuse me, are more likely to kind of find their sexuality and go out and have these experiences, maybe that are a little bit no strings attached, and experience pleasure and kind of a sense of fun from that. So first of all, I think we really need to break out of these traditional gender stereotypes where men are meant to behave one way after divorce and women are meant to behave the other way, and understand that it's really an individual choice. And again, it requires taking a step back and thinking about what are the types of relational sexual experiences that I want, and how can I go about communicating and establishing that first to myself so that I know that I'm focused on finding those when I go out to try to meet other people.
That's really good. Nicole, you were like reading my mind there. I was
Oh,
like, wow,
good.
she's not divorced, she's not a man, and she was speaking exactly
Oh,
to
good.
something that I've experienced. And I think it is true. When men are divorced, there's just this like drop into loneliness, isolation, friendship. We don't have the same support
Exactly.
that women have. So we end up on dating apps and we end up in casual situations when really a lot of times we are looking for that connection that we'd like to maybe be getting from our guy friends, but they're unavailable or they just want the highlight reel from the apps and the casual sex. Whereas
Yep.
women are doing it a lot healthier where they're getting the support, they're getting the camaraderie, and then they can also, to your point, go out and experience these other things. Guys, it seems like we try to bundle it all together and hope it works out. Usually doesn't, but yeah, really interesting to hear you talk about that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, is that I think women, that's where, our ability, like it or not, society is much more encouraging, much more reinforcing of us being expressive about our emotions and sharing those. Whereas for men, they're much more likely to be pressured to kind of bottle and push that down and not really even know how to broach the subject about what you're going through emotionally with other male friends. You just have almost been just denied the skill set from a very early age.
Totally. Well, let's get into, so we are putting ourselves out there and we're going on dates and they're leading places, and that can be very clunky and awkward for
Mhm.
everybody, which is one thing to your point about forgiving yourself. I always remind people, like, neither of us know what we're doing. We always assume the other
Yep.
person has been through this, but in reality, chances are you're both bumbling idiots just trying to, figure it out. Um, let's talk about like the importance of sexual chemistry in the beginning, and or if that does lead to hooking up and it's kind of like meh, not really there, you're not on the same page. Is that like the kiss of death, and how do we navigate that initial experience?
So that is absolutely not the kiss of death. Now, on the one hand, a total lack of attraction, no matter what mental gymnastics you go through, you're going to have rationalizing that relationship is not going to work. However, I would absolutely not take a total lack of fireworks in the beginning as a death sentence for the relationship. First of all, let's look at where those fireworks oftentimes come from, right? Fireworks, when you meet somebody, a lot of times, first of all, what's happening is you have to remember you don't really know that person that well. And so there's really this ability to transfer, this idolized image of the partner that you always wanted, all the things that your previous ex-wife or ex-husband never had, and to imagine those traits and abilities going on to the other person. So that's not entirely real, and it's certainly over time, as you get to know the person and intimacy and closeness increase, which are good things, you are slowly going to realize that this new person has faults and maybe isn't completely the same person as the idolized image that you put on top of them. And then on top of that, when you really drill down into like, well, what causes this like intense chemistry? A lot of times it's really just like the excitement and potential of a new relationship, and sort of, again, just our imaginations going wild into what it could be, what it could be like, if this relationship were to take off. And then also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention attachment theory here, which is just this idea that, if we meet someone who triggers us in some way, for example, maybe you were the type of person who grew up with a parent where the love felt a bit conditional at times, where you had to kind of achieve something or prove yourself in a certain way in order to gain the approval of your caregiver. If it was a little bit of a chase or a little bit of a, you really needing to seek out that relationship and never quite feeling like you had it, never quite feeling like you had that security, you're probably going to be attracted to the type of person who also makes you feel that way. And one of the things that I see a lot with my own divorced friends is they'll meet someone and there will be this intense chemistry and they're really excited about them. And then they start dating and they get closer. And guess what? It seems like the person they're now dating is actually a lot like their ex. And so that's where, you have to kind of, when we talk about having a type, make sure, spend some time looking at the types of dynamics that didn't make you feel necessarily great in your previous relationship. And maybe that also didn't make you feel great as a kid, so that you can intentionally choose other people. A lot of times, securely attached individuals, when you first meet them, they seem boring, right? We think, gosh, they're not making us feel like we're on our toes. We don't feel like we have to chase them. They're not playing hot and cold. They're following through when they say they're going to text us. We hear from them frequently. They're honest about how they feel. And because there isn't that chase, we mistake that sense of security that they're offering for just being boring. So I would say in that case, right, where you feel like the fireworks aren't there, give it time to build, because those are often the relationships where once the communication gets going, once you have a stronger sense of your own body, feel more comfortable sharing your own likes and dislikes, great sex, we have to remember, is a skill, and it is absolutely something that can develop over time, so long as there is a connection that's at the core of it. Again, if there's no level of attraction, you're wasting your time, but I would go for the slow burn over fireworks any day.
That's really good. What about when you are like, I am, there's a good connection with this person, but the first time or two that you are hooking up or having sex, it's just you're just on different pages. And
Yeah.
earlier you mentioned communication, which, let's be honest, is something that probably was not a good thing in your marriage, so you never really talked about it. How do you navigate, like, all right, let's try new things, or let's talk about things that are uncomfortable? What does that conversation and skill set look like?
So, those are great conversations to have. And those are best had when you have your clothes on. So, those are, I talk about sexual communication that happens during the sexual experience, and then the types of sexual communication skills that you can develop and use when you're not having sex. So, I think in that case, right, it might make sense to go to IHOP, go to some place that's not sexy and romantic, and have a conversation about, what are some of the things that you would want to try. If you go online, there are a lot of these green flag, yellow flag, red flag types of lists where they'll give you a list of different types of sexual activities ranging from doggy style to handcuffs, right? And so some of those things you think, wow, that might be a sexual position I want to try. Or maybe I do want to try out a different type of organic lube. Or maybe I do want to try out teaching my partner how to use my favorite vibrator on me, and so those can be things that you discuss and that you check yes. And then there are going to be the things that you say maybe definite no to, right? So maybe that's, and I'm just making this up, maybe for some women or men, that's anal sex, or maybe it's nipple clamps, whatever it is that's kind of off the table. And then and then there are the yellow ones, which are like, I don't know, like maybe let's see. Right. And so then you just start with that green list, right? And you kind of decide, okay, these are things maybe we should try. And then it's really about having a sexual growth mindset, which means not being afraid of failure. You might try things and they don't work out. And then that's actually good information to use for your next sexual experience. You now know that you don't like being flogged, but maybe you like being spanked a little bit, right? Maybe you like being, using ice cubes or different types of sensation play, or maybe you just want to try a different sexual position, or need to have clitoral stimulation while you're having, missionary sex, or whatever it is that you want to try. But again, it's about commitment to feedback and commitment to asking and initiating what you want, and being really as specific as possible during those conversations, so that you have the best chance of finding the skills and techniques and types of experiences that you truly want to have.
That's good. And I like how you said maybe don't do it in the middle of sex. Go to have
Yes.
that conversation at a Chili's and then see if it's
Exactly.
working. And I always say, like, these awkward conversations they're like great data. They're great, like, testing to see how this other person responds. You go to dinner and somebody's rude to the waiter. It's probably a good thing you found
Huge
that out really
information.
quick, because that might be like, this is not the person. If you
Yep.
bring up these conversations, the other person's like, oh, I don't talk about this stuff. It's probably not a
That's
promising connection.
exactly. And I promise that if they're like that about sex, and if they're rude to waiters, that behavior is going to extend outside those contexts. They're probably going to be rude to other people as well, show signs of entitlement, and not be able to talk about conflict when it arises. So, yeah, again, good information to have up front.
Yeah, you want to know this. It's frustrating because
Yeah,
dating is a lot of failure and rejection, but in
yeah,
reality, you want the no faster if it's going to be a no. You want to find
it's
these things
true.
out early on.
Exactly.
Got a few more topics, but Christy, anything to add there?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about those like first relationships post divorce, but a lot of our audience members, and I can echo them as well, are having a hard time even taking that first step. Like I don't want to have another, I'm not ready to have a sexual experience with another partner. I don't, I'm spending time on myself. I'm trying to heal. I'm trying to grow. Like probably the majority of us post divorce, looked at ourselves and looked inward and tried to do some reflecting and improvement. And for some of us, it's going to take longer than others to kind of like reconnect with just our own identity and our own sexuality and what can they be doing in this like period of growth that sets them up for better experiences with a partner, you know, emotionally, romantically, sexually down the road. How can they heal their own sexuality in the in between space?
Well, again, I think that this comes down to a lot of misperceptions, which, we kind of assume because we see so much more sex on Netflix, in the movies, people talking about sex, we assume that everyone is having tons of sex. When in fact, a lot of us are not having that much sex, right? You might actually go to, if we go online, if you go and read any of the research, we're actually having a lot less sex than we were 20, 30 years ago, or at least than our parents were when they were our age. So, with that in mind, we need to normalize not wanting to just jump into bed with somebody right away, right? That makes sense to take some time and heal yourself, right? You want to be able to find what are the types of interests, hobbies, friendships that really make you light up, right? This is about rediscovering joy and other forms of pleasure in your life so that you feel comfortable. And it kind of goes back to my earlier point about self compassion and giving yourself some space to grow and realize that you'll know when you're ready, right? And I think it's, for a lot of people, I would highly recommend therapy. I mean, I think everyone should be in therapy. Being able to kind of work through what are those feelings of vulnerability that have come up for you and what are sort of the best ways that you can heal. But I think this is a time to really engage in a lot of self care, right? I mean, see friends, go on girls' trips, right? Get a massage, reconnect with yourself, and just know that when you're ready, you'll know it. And it's okay to wait until you feel more comfortable taking that step.
That's really good. One of the topics that we get a lot, like most frustrating things about dating and relationships and sex after divorce, is when you're a parent, you have your kids half the time, sometimes all the time. The other person has their kids, a time that probably doesn't even fit with your schedule. So all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have this connection with somebody, but we have one day a month where we're on the same page, or they live 2 hours away, or all these like obstacles that, let's be honest, when we were in our 20s, when we met, it was like open road. It's just like, we'll figure it out. Now all of a sudden there's all these like, it gets more challenging. So what I find is all of a sudden now you're texting a lot, you're having to find new ways to communicate and connect. And I always tell people, I'm like, we didn't even have texting 15 years ago, and now we're supposed to like know how to do this at the right time. Things like, sexting or sending dirty pictures, or you always hear about like the guys sending dick pics within like the first 2 hours. Like, does anybody receive that well? But can you talk a little bit about like the in between time of like how to keep that connection, how to be sexual, but like also respecting the other person?
Yeah, such a good question. So first of all, at a very concrete level, I always really recommend waiting to introduce your partner to your own kids, and taking that steps to blend your families. That should really be after your relationship has been really well established. Because what you don't want to do is bring in sort of another dimension of instability. If, not to say that your relationship doesn't have a great chance of taking off, but in the beginning, it should just really be about you and your new partner connecting and building the foundation of your relationship. The next thing is to understand that we live in a modern world where there are lots of different types of relationshiping, right? We're in a world where not all long term relationships have to be structured in a traditional way where you live together and where have, the different roles as mother and father. You've taken a step away from that for a reason, right? And I think that it's not that having, thinking that eventually you want that relationship again where you see the partner and you live together and you see each other every day. It's not that that's not a totally valid and great goal to have, and it's absolutely achievable. But just keep in mind that you're not a failure if your relationship is something where you're only actually seeing each other once a week, right? I mean, it's okay if, as you said, there are lots of ways to FaceTime, especially I think, I recommend checking in many times during the day, just to see how is your day? How's it going? I think frequent communication is really good. And then, there are a lot of relationships where, the term is LAT, right? Living apart together. And that's really what you're going to have in the beginning, where you both have kids and it's a question of just coordinating times when both of you are alone and able to truly focus on each other. And, just remember, a lot of couples who are married don't have that at all, right? They may live together, but they're living with their kids, and the frequency of time when they just see each other, either having date nights or going away for a weekend together, right? A lot of couples don't have that. So you're already ahead if you're able to schedule even one night a week where you're just totally focused on each other. And then third, don't be afraid to, this is where planning really, really matters. And so it might be trying to coordinate your schedules, where I know that what most child and family psychologists recommend now is this, as you mentioned, 1 week on, you're alternating by week. So see if you can line up your week so they're together, right? So that you both have, similar times when your children are with your ex-spouse. And that's not something that you're not, denying your kids' needs. Or I know that absolutely the focus should be on making sure that your kids are happy and adjusted. But at the same time, your happiness matters too. And your kids are going to be happy if you're happy. So don't be afraid to say to your spouse, hey, I really need the second week and the fourth week of every month off. Like, that's what's going to work for me. Can we try to make that work? As opposed to just being accommodating to whatever their schedule is. So, and I think if you are dating someone who's not willing to make you a priority and isn't able at all to set apart time that's just for you, that's probably a bit of a red flag, right? That probably means that that person really isn't ready for a relationship yet and may unconsciously almost be using that as an excuse to just not really allow things to progress, which, again, better to know early than to end up in a long-term frustrating experience.
Mm. My mind is just spinning as you're saying it. I'm like, I know this all sounds so good on paper, but it's like when you actually like try to plug it in, I'm like, it can
Yep.
just be so frustrating,
Yep.
and then it leads to like, it's interesting that now 80% of your relationship is over text, and that can get misconstrued. Somebody does the wrong emoji, and all of a sudden you're like, "Have a
Mm-hmm.
good day." What do you mean by that? Now we're in a fight,
Yeah.
but we're not even talking, and I'm like, "What?
Mhm.
This is
Right.
PhD level stuff here."
I think FaceTime at least once a day is what I would really recommend, because there's so much that gets communicated via just seeing someone's face and how they're responding to what you're saying and tone of voice. And let's face it, some people are really expressive at, text, and some people are terrible at it. I think text is a great way to say, hey, reservations at 7 p.m. tonight, or can you pick up milk on the way home? It's not a good way to check in with your partner, right? It's not a good way to, keep that connection alive. I really think finding time, again, scheduling it when you can FaceTime each other every day is really important.
Christy, any other final thoughts or questions? We had a ton of topics, but we might have to continue this another time. What do you think, Christy?
You just trigger a thought for me that I don't know if I'm too old to be using Snapchat, but I feel like Snapchat is actually a very valuable tool if you use it correctly when dating, to be able to send like short videos and get like the full, like maybe I'm just telling you about how I'm running to the grocery store, or just telling you about my errands that I'm going through
Yes.
to do throughout the day, but you're seeing my face, you're, seeing what it's like for me to run errands and manage my life, and all of those things. And it's just a quick kind of glimpse into the chaos of a person's day, and maybe is a little bit less scary or intense as FaceTime. That FaceTime, I feel like, is like going live on Facebook. Like there's no room for error now. We're looking at each other face to face. But Snapchat, especially like in the beginning, maybe is an opportunity to screen my video a little bit. I'm
Yes.
going to fix my hair, but
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea, but I would also say, for FaceTime, do activities while you're doing it. Maybe you both love to cook, right? Maybe you've got FaceTime going while you're, cooking. Maybe you've got FaceTime going while you're out for a walk. It doesn't have to be right in front of you where it's just eye contact and intense anxiety about what are we going to talk about. So sometimes when you're moving or doing other activities, it can make it feel a little bit less pressure filled.
Yeah, I like that idea though, like a little bit of that asynchronous where you don't have to be on the same. My kids are running around. I can't FaceTime right now. The other person's like, well, I want to flirt and play. And I'm
Yeah.
like, there's
Yeah.
literally a fire next to me. So finding other ways. But as we talk about it, I'm like, can you imagine like our parents having these conversations about like, oh, how to date? And it's like, well, sometimes you got to do a Snapchat when you're grocery shopping to send it to them because they might not. And it's like, no wonder nobody understands why this is so freaking hard.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's just so great that we at least live in an age where we're having these conversations, and our expectations for our relationships have absolutely increased, right? We expect a lot more in terms of wanting someone who is, our partner, who is our, there for us to support us emotionally, who, is engages with us intellectually, who's a great sexual partner, who is, there for us, when we most need them. Those are amazing goals to have, but we have to remember that they also take work, right? And they take conversations and communication. So that's, you can achieve a soulmate. And I use the word achieve because I think soulmates are made, not found. But it's just understanding that if that's your goal, it's going to take some effort and work, and there's going to be some struggle along the way.
One last thought, and you said education. I think like nobody talked about any of this stuff, or if they did, it was not as accessible as an Instagram or a podcast. Sometimes I think like, do we know too much? Is this making relationships even harder? Is that a crazy thing to
No,
say?
I don't think we know too much. I just think we have to understand that, again, it's not about, having this perfect relationship. That's not the only mold. What we can't, we see the movies and the media, and it makes it look like those relationships where all of your needs are met are just so easy to achieve. First of all, no partner is going to be able to meet all of your needs, right? We have this a lot of times there's a temptation to have this childhood wish where you'll find that person who just immediately intuits everything you want and need without your having to tell them, right? That doesn't exist. But what does exist are relationships that can make us deeply happy and that can really fulfill, a lot of our needs, maybe not all of them, but they take a lot of work. And so it might be that you're willing to invest that work and take time to find the person who you think can join you in the journey to try to have that relationship. But it's also okay along the way if that's just not something you have time for, right? Maybe it's that you have time for something a little bit more casual or just to go a lot more slowly. And that's okay too, right? Don't let that tippy top model of a relationship be the only model that works. It's really just a question of what you have time for and what you're emotionally ready for.
Totally agree. And you really only learn those things by
Yep,
experiencing them. And that can be
exactly.
frustrating and hard, but you do like learn what you like, what you're capable of, what you don't. And
Yep.
yes, just keep learning. Nicole, this was amazing. We have 50 other questions, but we'll save this sexier, spicier ones for next time. Let
Great.
people know where they can connect with you.
Oh, great. Thank you. So I post a lot of fun educational videos about sex and somewhat on relationships on my Instagram and TikTok. My handle is Nicole _ the sex professor. And then I also have a newsletter that you can sign up for where I give out monthly sex advice that you can sign up for by going to my website at www.nicolethesexprofessor.com. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I always say life after divorce is like you're going back to kindergarten. You got to relearn all
Yeah.
these things. And now we know there is a class about sex that we can take.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Nicole. Thanks, Christy.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Rob and Christy.
Thank you.